found her best friend's body at dawn, cold and broken in the dirt behind the stables, and every single piece of evidence pointed to Freya as the killer. Her cloak clutched in the dead girl's hand, scratches from a desperate fight carved into her arms, an entire village of witnesses who saw them arguing the night before. But here is what made Freya's blood run cold. She could not remember anything after that argument. The whole night had been erased from her mind like someone took a blade and cut those hours clean out of her memory. 5 days. That is all she had before the assembly would declare her an outlaw, and anyone could kill her without consequence. 5 days to prove she did not murder the only person in the world who truly understood her soul. 5 days to uncover who really killed Ingrid and why they wanted both girls destroyed. Because as Freya sat chained in that storage house, pieces of that lost night began surfacing in her fractured memory. And what she remembered made her realize this was never about jealousy or rage. This was something far more calculated, far more terrifying. Someone had planned her best friend's murder with meticulous precision. Someone had drugged Freya, staged every piece of evidence, and walked away clean while she took the blame. And the deeper she dug into that night, the more she uncovered a secret so devastating it could shatter families, ignite blood feuds, and destroy everything she thought she knew about the people she trusted most. But knowing the truth and proving it were two very different things, and time was running out faster than the blood draining from a cut throat. Estabelecer a amizade Freya Ingrid, flashbacks emocionais, plus encontrar corpo, plus acusação. Capítulo 2. Fim marcado. Evidências devastadoras. Freya acorrentada. Cliffhanger. Olaf sussurra. Eu vi algo naquela noite. Capítulo 3. Primeiro suspeito. Dag. O noivo rejeitado. Evidências apontam para ele. Cliffhanger. Dag tem álibi perfeito. Capítulo 4. Segundo suspeito. Sven, irmão invejoso. Plus. Descoberta da gravidez. Cliffhanger. Pai do bebê pode ser. Capítulo 5. Revelação de quem é o pai. Plus novo suspeito. Cliffhanger. Freya percebe padrão nas evidências contra ela. Capítulo 6. Freya entende quem a incriminou e por quê. Cliffhanger. Mas não tem como provar. Thing é amanhã. Capítulo 7. Último dia. Plano desesperado. Ajuda inesperada. Cliffhanger. Thing começa. Freya deve falar. Capítulo 8. Confronto público. Verdade exposta. Decisão sobre segredo de Ingrid. Consequências para 2 gerações. Pronto para desenvolver os 8 capítulos desta opção. Confirma para eu começar a escrever? Retri HM. Desenvolva o capítulo 1 da história desta opção com riqueza de detalhes. Não crie subtítulos. E jamais se esqueça de se basear na descrição do capítulo para não estragar a história. O capítulo deve ter entre 5.500 a 600 e 500 caracteres. Isso é muito importante. O script todo deve ser escrito em inglês, como se fosse uma pessoa estadunidense nativa que estivesse narrando. Isso é muito importante. Não utilize o Artifacts para fazer o roteiro. Quero tudo dentro deste chat. Inicie diretamente com o capítulo 1 e finalize com o fim do capítulo 1. Essas partes mantenha em português, mas escreva o conteúdo do capítulo em inglês. Sempre que houver números, você deve escrevê-los por extenso. Não se esqueça. Pode começar a desenvolver o capítulo e tenha em mente que o capítulo 1 é o mais importante de todos, pois é o que vai prender o espectador para que ele queira continuar assistindo à história. Por favor, seja impecável na construção, principalmente do primeiro. Haja como um cineasta para prender o espectador desde a primeira linha que escrever. E lembre-se também, quero uma história muito emocionante, a ponto de o espectador chorar de emoção. É importante também que haja um choque emocional logo nas primeiras linhas da história para manter o espectador no vídeo, melhorando assim a minha retenção. Show more. Capítulo 1. The scream tore through the morning mist before the sun even touched the fjord, and Freya knew with absolute certainty that her life had just shattered into pieces she would never fit back together. She was knee-deep in the icy stream behind her father's farmhouse, hands numb from scrubbing wool in water so cold it burned, when that sound reached her. Not just any scream. Helga's scream. The cook who never raised her voice, who hummed while kneading bread, who had fed Freya honey. Cake since she was 5 winters old. The sound was wrong, all wrong, like an animal caught in a trap, high and broken and endless. Freya's hands were still dripping, wool forgotten in the current, when she started running. Her leather boots slipped on wet stones. Sheep scattered as she crashed through the lower pasture. Her breath came in sharp gasps that tasted like fear, though she did not yet know why fear had wrapped its fingers around her ribs and squeezed. The main hall of Jarl Magnar's. Longhouse stood on the hill above the fjord, its carved wooden posts visible even through the dawn fog. Freya had run up this same path 1,000 times before, 10,000 times, since she was 7 and Ingrid was 8, and the Jarl's daughter had grabbed her hand during a harvest feast and declared them sisters despite the difference in their blood and stations. But she had never run like this, never with her heart hammering so hard it felt like Thor himself was striking an anvil inside her chest. People were gathering near the stables when she crested the hill. Too many people, too early, all standing in a circle that had the shape of tragedy. Freya pushed through bodies that felt like stone, past Bjorn the blacksmith and Liv the weaver and Dag, Ingrid's betrothed, whose face had gone the color of old bone. Then she saw the boots, brown leather, fur-lined at the top. Boots she had helped Ingrid oil just 3 days ago while they laughed about absolutely nothing, the way only people who have known each other their entire lives can laugh. No. The word left Freya's mouth before her mind could catch up with what her eyes were showing her. No, no, no. Ingrid lay in the dirt between the stable wall and the mead hall, her body twisted like she had fallen badly or been thrown. Her dress, the blue one with the silver clasps that made her eyes look like summer sky, was torn at the shoulder. Her blonde hair, always so carefully braided, had come loose and spread across the frozen ground like spilled wheat. But it was her face that made Freya's knees buckle. Ingrid's face, still beautiful even now, was utterly empty. The light that had always danced in those blue eyes, the mischief and warmth and fierce intelligence, was simply gone. Freya dropped beside her. Her hands reached for Ingrid's shoulder, shaking it gently, then harder. "Wake up, Ingrid. Wake up. This is not funny. Wake up right now." Someone pulled her back. Strong hands, urgent. Her father's voice. In her ear, rough with something that might have been grief or might have been terror. "Freya, no. Do not touch her. Do not. She is cold." Freya heard herself say the words from very far away. "Father, she is so cold. We need to get her inside. We need to warm her. She'll catch fever in this." "She's dead, child." Völva Astrid, the old seer, spoke from somewhere in the circle of witnesses. Her voice was gentler than Freya had ever heard it. "She's been dead since before moonset." The world tilted sideways. Dead. The word made no sense. Ingrid could not be dead. Yesterday they had walked along the fjord together, and Ingrid had confessed she was terrified of her wedding to Dag next month. "What if I don't love him the way a wife should?" she had whispered. "What if I feel trapped forever?" And Freya had squeezed her hand and promised, "You will never be trapped. I will always be here. Always." Jarl Magnar pushed through the crowd, and the sound he made when he saw his daughters' body was not human. It was the sound of something fundamental breaking, of a mountain cracking in half. He fell to his knees beside Ingrid, gathering her into his arms with a tenderness that made Freya's throat close completely. "My girl, my little girl." Then his eyes, red-rimmed and wild with grief, found Freya's face, and something in his expression shifted, hardened. "You." His voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried further than any shout. "You were with her last night." Freya's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Last night, the solstice feast. She remembered drinking hydromel that burned sweeter than usual. She remembered laughing, dancing, Ingrid pulling her outside to look at the stars because the hall had grown too hot, too loud. She remembered the cold air on her flushed face. And then, Nothing. A blank space where memory should be, like someone had taken a blade and cut that entire piece of time out of her mind. "I don't," Freya started, her voice shaking. "I do not remember. We went outside and then I woke in my bed this morning and—" "Liar." The word came from Dag. His hands were clenched into fists so tight his knuckles had gone white. "Olaf saw you arguing with her near the stables. He heard shouting." "No." Freya shook her head so hard her vision blurred. "No, I would never. Ingrid was my sister. I loved her more than—" "Your cloak." Völva Astrid's ancient finger pointed, and everyone's eyes followed. There, clutched in Ingrid's right hand, was a piece of dark green fabric, the exact color of the cloak Freya's mother had woven for her last winter, the cloak she had been wearing at the feast. Freya's stomach turned to ice. And look. Sven, Ingrid's younger brother, knelt and lifted Ingrid's left hand. Scratches ran down the pale skin, angry and red. Defensive wounds, the kind someone gets when they fight for their life. Under her nails, blood and skin. Every eye turned to Freya. She looked down at her own hands, still wet from the stream, and saw what they all saw. Scratches on her forearms, 3 parallel lines on each arm, exactly the width of fingernails. She had woken with them this morning and assumed she had scratched herself in sleep or caught her arms on something during the feast. "I did not do this." Her voice came out small, childlike. "Please. I do not remember what happened, but I know I would never hurt her. She was everything to me." Jarl Magnar stood slowly, still holding his daughter's body. When he spoke, his voice was hollow, scraped clean of everything except grief that had already begun curdling into rage. "The thing convenes in 5 days. Until then, you will be held." He looked at Bjorn and 2 other men. "Take her. Chain her in the storage house, no visitors except family." "Father." Freya turned to her own father, desperation clawing up her throat. "Father, tell them I could not—" But her father's face had crumpled. He looked at her scratched arms, at the green fabric in Ingrid's dead hand, at the blood under those pale fingernails. And Freya saw the exact moment he began to doubt her. The exact moment the possibility entered his mind that maybe, somehow, his daughter had done this terrible thing. They dragged her away as the sun finally broke over the fjord, painting everything in gold that felt like mockery. Behind her, Jarl Magnar's sobs echoed across the valley, and Freya realized with crystalline horror that 5 days from now, she would stand before the entire community and be judged for murdering the only person in the world who had ever truly understood her soul. She had 5 days to prove she had not killed her own sister. 5 days to remember a night that had been stolen from her mind. 5 days to find out who had done this, and why they wanted both Ingrid dead and Freya destroyed. 5 days before she became an outlaw, exiled from everything she had ever known, with permission for anyone to kill her on sight. The chains were heavy on her wrists, but not as heavy as the certainty settling in her chest like a stone. Someone had planned this with meticulous care. Someone wanted both girls gone, and they had almost succeeded. The storage house smelled like old fish and despair. Freya sat on the dirt floor with her back against rough wooden planks, iron shackles biting into her wrists, and tried to piece together a night that refused to come back to her. She had been sitting like this for 2 days. 2 days of her father bringing her water and dried fish, his eyes never quite meeting hers. 2 days of her mother weeping outside the door but never coming in. 2 days of the entire village walking past, their whispers sharp as broken glass. Murderer. Monster. How could she? The worst part was not knowing if they were right. Freya closed her eyes and forced herself back to the feast. The hall had been packed with bodies, loud with drinking songs and the clash of cups. She remembered Ingrid laughing at something Sven had said. Her cheeks flushed from mead. She remembered Dag trying to pull Ingrid onto his lap, and the flash of irritation across Ingrid's face before she smiled and extracted herself gracefully. She remembered thinking that Ingrid did not love him, would never love him, but would marry him anyway because that was what Jarl's daughters did. Then what? They had gone outside. Yes. Freya could almost see it now, the two of them stumbling into the cold night air, giggling like they were children again. Ingrid had said something about needing to tell her a secret. An important secret. What secret? The memory slipped away like water through her fingers. "You are trying too hard." The voice came from the darkness near the door, so unexpected that Freya's head snapped up hard enough to hurt her neck. An old man stood there, barely visible in the thin light filtering through the wall cracks. Olaf. The thrall who worked in the Jarl's stables, who had been there so long most people forgot he existed. He was ancient, his back bent like a wind-twisted tree, his hands gnarled from decades of hard labor. "They will kill me for being here," he said, shuffling closer with movements that were surprisingly quiet for someone so old. "But I have been watching people lie and tell truths for 70 winters. You did not kill that girl." Freya's throat tightened. Someone believed her. After 2 days of doubt pressing down on her chest like a boulder, someone actually believed her. "Then who did?" Her voice came. "Outhorse from disuse." Olaf lowered himself to the ground with a grunt, sitting just out of reach, as if even he was not entirely certain of her innocence. "That is the question that will save your life or end it." He pulled something from his tunic, a small piece of dark bread, and pushed it toward her. "Eat. You cannot think on an empty stomach." Freya's hands shook as she reached for it. The bread was stale, but she forced it down, her body remembering suddenly that she had barely eaten since. They locked her away. "I saw you and the girl go toward the stables that night," Olaf continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "But I saw someone else too, following you both, staying in the shadows." Freya's heart kicked hard against her ribs. "Who?" "Olaf, who was it?" "Too dark, too far. Could have been man or woman, tall or short." He shook his head slowly. "But they moved wrong. Like someone trying very hard not to be seen. Like someone with purpose. Why did you not tell the Jarl this?" Olaf's laugh was bitter and short. "I am thrall. My word means nothing in Thing. They would say I lie to protect you, or that my old eyes see things that are not there." He leaned forward, and his eyes, clouded with age, still held surprising sharpness. "But you can use this. If you can figure out who had reason to want the girl dead and you blamed for it." Freya's mind raced. Ingrid had enemies. Sweet, beloved Ingrid, who everyone adored. It seemed impossible. But then again, she was the Jarl's only daughter. She would inherit significant lands. Her marriage to Dag would unite two powerful families. "Dag," Freya whispered. "He gains her dowry lands even if she dies before the wedding." The betrothal contract was already signed. Perhaps. Olaf did not sound convinced, but Dag wept like a child over her body. "I have seen many false tears in my life. His were real." "Then who? Sven?" Even as she said it, Freya knew it was wrong. Sven worshipped his older sister. He followed her around, like a loyal hound. "Think about what changes now that she is gone," Olaf said. "Who benefits? Who is safer? Who is freer?" Before Freya could answer, footsteps approached outside. Olaf moved faster than should have been possible for someone his age, pressing himself into the darkest corner. The door scraped open and torchlight flooded in, blinding after the dimness. Velva Astrid entered, her shadow stretching long and strange across the dirt floor. The old seer moved like smoke, silent and somehow ominous despite her small frame. She carried a clay cup that steamed in the cold air. "Drink this," she commanded, holding it toward Freya. "It will help you remember." Freya eyed the cup suspiciously. "What is in it?" "Herbs, mushrooms, things that open the locked doors in your mind." Astrid's face was unreadable. "You want to remember that night, yes? This will help, or you can refuse and face the thing with nothing but empty promises of innocence." Every instinct screamed not to trust anything the vulva offered. But what choice did she have? In 3 more days she would stand before the entire community with no memory, no proof, nothing but her own desperate word against a mountain of evidence. Freya took the cup. The liquid inside smelled earthy and bitter, like rotting leaves and something else she could not identify. She lifted it to her lips and drank. It burned going down, not hot but sharp, like swallowing nettles. Within moments her head began to feel strange, light, and heavy at the same time. The walls of the storage house seemed to breathe. "What did you give me?" Freya's tongue felt thick. "Truth," Astrid said simply. She settled onto the ground across from Freya, her old bones cracking. "Now tell me what you remember. All of it. Even the parts that seem wrong or impossible." The memory came back in fragments, sharp-edged and too bright. Ingrid pulling her outside, her face serious despite the mead in her blood. "I need to tell you something. Something no one else can know." "What?" Freya heard herself ask, her voice young and worried in the memory. "I am with child." The words hit Freya like a physical blow, both in the memory and now in the storage house. She gasped, and Astrid leaned forward with sudden intensity. "Whose child?" the vulva demanded. In the memory, Freya was asking the same question, and Ingrid's face, beautiful and terrified, was saying a name. But even with the herbs unlocking her mind, Freya could not hear it. The name was there on the edge of understanding, but something kept it just out of reach. "I cannot..." Freya pressed her palms against her temples. "I can hear her saying it, but I cannot understand the words." "Try harder." Astrid's voice was sharp now, urgent, but the memory was shifting, darkening. Someone else was there, a third shadow moving toward them from the direction of the mead hall. Ingrid saw them first, and her face changed from fear to something worse. Recognition and absolute terror. She knew who was coming. She knew what was about to happen. "No," Ingrid whispered in the memory. "Please no, I will not tell anyone, I swear it, please." Then nothing, a blank space, and Freya waking in her own bed the next morning with scratches on her arms and no memory of how she got there. "Someone else was there," Freya said, forcing the words through numb lips. Ingrid knew them. She begged them not to hurt her. "And I think they did something to me. Hit me or drugged me. That is why I cannot remember." Astrid sat back, her expression troubled. If Ingrid was carrying a child and the father was not her betrothed, that secret alone could destroy families, start blood feuds. She stood slowly. "You have 3 days left, girl. 3 days to figure out whose child she carried and who wanted that secret buried badly enough to kill for it." The vulva left, taking the torchlight with her. In the returning darkness, Olaf's voice came from his corner. "The scratches on your arms," he said softly. "Did you notice they are too perfect, too parallel? Like someone held your arms and dragged nails across them while you were unconscious." Freya looked down at the marks, barely visible in the dimness. He was right. They were too uniform, too deliberate. Someone had staged everything. The torn cloak, the scratches, her blackout. They had murdered Ingrid and then carefully, methodically, turned Freya into the perfect suspect. The question was who, and the answer was buried. Somewhere in that lost night, in the name Ingrid had spoken before she died, in the identity of the child she would never birth. 3 days to find a killer who had thought of everything. 3 days to prove the impossible. The third morning of Freya's imprisonment brought an unexpected visitor. Dag pushed through the storage house door like a man walking into battle, his jaw set hard and his eyes red-rimmed from grief that had not let him sleep. He looked at Freya with such raw hatred that she pressed herself back against the wall, chains rattling. "I loved her." His voice shook. "Since we were children, I loved her, and you took her from me." Freya forced herself to meet his gaze despite every instinct screaming to look away. "I did not kill her, Dag. I swear on everything sacred I did not." "Liar." He moved closer, and she could smell the meat on him, sharp and sour. He had been drinking since dawn, maybe since yesterday. "Everyone saw you arguing with her during the feast. Bjorn heard you shouting that she was making a mistake." Freya's breath caught. She did remember that now, fragments coming back slowly. They had argued inside the hall before going outside. But about what? "What mistake?" she asked carefully. What did I say she was making a mistake about? Dog's face twisted with something between anger and confusion. Her marriage to me. You told her she should not go through with it, that she would regret it forever. His hands clenched into fists. You were jealous. You could not stand that she was leaving you behind to become my wife. That is not. Freya started, then stopped. Because part of it was true, was it not? She had been terrified of losing Ingrid to marriage, to a life of running Dag's household and bearing his children. But jealous enough to kill? Never. Dag. She kept her voice steady though her heart hammered. Did Ingrid seem different to you in the days before she died? Scared? Worried about something? Why would you ask? That? Suspicion sharpened his features. Because I think someone else killed her. Someone who had a reason we have not seen yet. Dag laughed, but there was no humor in it. Of course you would say that, but the evidence was placed there. Freya leaned forward as far as her chains allowed. Think, Dag. Really think. Did Ingrid love you? The question hit him like a blow. His face went pale, then red. She was going to be my wife. That is not what I asked. The silence stretched between them, heavy and painful. Finally, Dag's shoulders sagged. When he spoke again, his voice was barely a whisper. She cared for me, respected me. That would have grown into love in time. But it was not love yet. Freya pressed, hating herself for hurting him, but needing the truth more. Did she ever seem reluctant? Did she ever try to postpone the wedding? Dag turned away, his back rigid. 3 weeks ago she asked if we could wait another season. She said she was not ready, that she needed more time. He ran a hand through his hair roughly. I told her father. I thought maybe she was just nervous, that Jarl Magnar could reassure her it was normal for brides to feel uncertain. Freya's mind raced. 3 weeks ago. That would have been right around when Ingrid might have realized she was carrying a child that was not Dag's, because if it had been, she would have rushed the wedding, not delayed it. What did the Jarl say? That the wedding would proceed as planned. That Ingrid was young and would adjust. Dag's voice hardened again. And she did. She stopped asking to delay it. She seemed to accept her fate. Or she seemed to, Freya thought. But inside she must have been terrified, watching her belly, knowing that soon everyone would know her secret. Dag, I need you to think very carefully. Who spent time alone with Ingrid in the weeks before she died? Who did she confide in? Why would I tell you anything? He spun back to face her, anger returning. You are trying to save yourself by throwing suspicion on innocent people. I am trying to find who really killed the woman we both loved. Freya met his eyes steadily. You want justice for her, do you not? Real justice, not just the easiest answer? Something in Dag's expression shifted. Not belief, not yet, but the smallest crack in his certainty. She spent time with Sven, her brother. They were always close. Who else? Velva Astrid came to see her twice. Something about women's matters, Ingrid said. She would not tell me more. He frowned, remembering. And Leif came to visit a few times. Jarl Magnar's cousin from the northern settlement. He was staying in the longhouse while negotiating some land dispute. Freya's stomach dropped. Leif. She had seen him at the feast, a man perhaps 30 winters old, handsome in a sharp-featured way, with clever eyes and an easy smile. He had danced with several women that night, including Ingrid. How long had Leif been staying there? About a month. Dag's eyes narrowed. Why? What are you thinking? Before Freya could answer, her father appeared in the doorway, his face grave. Dag, you should not be here. The Jarl said no visitors except family. I am her betrothed, Dag said, but his voice lacked conviction. I had a right to go. Her father's tone left no room for argument. Dag hesitated, looking at Freya one last time. Some of the hatred had drained from his face, replaced by something more complicated. Doubt, maybe. Or the beginning of it. Then he left, his footsteps heavy on the frozen ground outside. Her father knelt beside her, setting down a bowl of fish stew. His hands trembled slightly. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the absolute truth. Anything." Freya's voice broke on the word. "Did you and Ingrid fight that night? Really fight, not just disagree?" Freya closed her eyes, reaching for memories that were still hazy and incomplete. "We argued about her marriage. I told her she did not have to go through with it if she did not want to. That we could run away together, start over somewhere new." The memory solidified as she spoke it aloud. "She told me I was being childish, that I did not understand duty or responsibility. She said," Freya's throat tightened, "she said I would understand when I grew up. And that made you angry?" "Yes, furious." Tears burned behind Freya's eyes. "I told her she was a coward, that she was choosing the easy path instead of fighting for what she really wanted." She looked at her father desperately. "But I would never hurt her. Even when I was angry, even when we fought, I loved her more than my own life." Her father's face worked through a dozen emotions before settling into something that looked like belief, or the want to believe, which was perhaps the same thing. "Someone came to me this morning, said they saw Leif following you and Ingrid toward the stables that night." Who saw him?" "Runa, the weaver's daughter. She was meeting her sweetheart by the grain stores." He lowered his voice even further. "She said Leif looked angry, that he was walking fast with purpose." Freya's heart began to race. "We need to tell the Jarl. We need to." "Leif left yesterday morning, returned to his settlement in the north. Said he could not bear to stay for the funeral, that Ingrid's death hit him too hard." Her father's expression was grim. "Convenient, is it not? To leave before anyone could question him closely. So we have no proof. Just one witness who saw him following us, which he could easily explain away. No proof yet." Her father stood, his jaw set in determination. "But you have 2 more days before the thing. I will find proof. I will talk to everyone who was at that feast, everyone who might have seen something. I will find out why Leif would want Ingrid dead." After he left, Freya sat in the darkness and thought about timelines. Leif had been staying at the Longhouse for a month. Ingrid had tried to delay her wedding 3 weeks ago. The pieces were there, just out of reach, almost fitting together. If Leif was the father of Ingrid's child, he had every reason to want her silenced before the pregnancy became obvious. But why frame Freya? Why not just make it look like an accident, a fall, anything else? Unless Leif knew that Ingrid had told Freya the truth. Unless he needed to eliminate both the woman carrying his bastard and the only person she trusted with the secret. The storage house door opened again, and Freya expected her mother, or maybe Olaf. Instead, Völva Astrid slipped inside, moving like shadow. "The herbs I gave you," the old woman said without preamble. "They did more than help you remember, yes? They showed you something." Freya nodded slowly. "Ingrid was pregnant." "I know." Astrid's face was impossible to read in the dimness. "She came to me 4 weeks ago, terrified. Asked if I had herbs that could end a pregnancy. I told her I did, but that using them was dangerous. That she should tell the father first." "Did she tell you who the father was?" Astrid's silence was answer enough. "You know," Freya whispered. "You know, and you have not told anyone. Because the child was not the problem," Astrid said quietly. "The father was." Before Freya could demand more, the Völva pulled something from her cloak. A small piece of fabric, dark blue with silver thread. Part of a man's tunic, torn. "I found this clutched in Ingrid's other hand. The hand no one looked at because they were so focused on your green cloak in her right hand." Astrid held it up to what little light filtered through the walls. "Do you recognize the pattern?" Freya's blood turned to ice. She did recognize it. She had seen it just 2 days ago, at the funeral pyre. Leif had been wearing a tunic with that exact pattern of silver thread when he left for the north. "He has an alibi," Astrid said, her voice heavy. 3 people saw him in the mead hall when you and Ingrid went outside. He never left. He was there all night, drinking and singing with the others." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. If Leif had an alibi, if people could swear he never left the hall, then either he was innocent or someone was lying for him. Or the impossible was true. Someone else had worn his tunic that night. The fourth day of Freya's captivity dawned with frost so thick it looked like the gods had covered the world in silver. She had not slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Ingrid's face in that last memory, twisted with terror as she recognized whoever was coming toward them in the darkness. Footsteps approached the storage house earlier than usual. Multiple sets. When the door opened, her mother stood there with tears streaming down her face, and behind her, Sven. Ingrid's brother looked like he had aged 10 winters in 4 days. His face was gaunt, his eyes hollow. "I need to speak with her alone," Sven said, his voice rough. Freya's mother hesitated, then nodded and stepped outside. The door closed, leaving them in the dim morning light that barely penetrated the cracks in the walls. Sven stood there for a long moment, just staring at her. Then he sank to the ground and put his head in his hands. "Tell me you did not do it. Please. I need to hear you say it." "I did not kill her, Sven. I swear it on my life." "Then who did?" He looked up, and the anguish in his eyes made Freya's chest ache. "Because my father is convinced." "It was you. The whole village is convinced. And in 1 more day, the thing will exile you, and Ingrid will still be dead. And I will have lost both of you." Freya took a breath, knowing she was about to shatter whatever was left of his world. "Sven, did you know Ingrid was carrying a child?" The color drained from his face so fast she thought he might faint. "What? No, that is impossible. She was not married yet. She would never—" "She was. I remembered it. She told me that night, right before—" Freya's voice broke. "Right before someone killed her for it." Sven stood abruptly, pacing the small space like a caged animal. "Who? Who was the father?" "I think it was Leif." "Your father's cousin?" "No." Sven shook his head violently. "No, that cannot be right. Leif was kind to her, friendly, but nothing more, and he has an alibi. I saw him in the hall all night myself." "Did you?" Freya pressed. "Did you see him every single moment? Or do you just remember him being there?" Sven's pacing slowed. His face went through a series of expressions as he tried to remember that night. I saw him early in the evening, and later when the drinking song started. But in between, he stopped moving entirely. Gods, I do not know. The hall was so crowded, so loud. He could have slipped out and I might not have noticed. Völva Astrid found a piece of his tunic in Ingrid's hand. Then why has she not told my father? Why has she not brought this to the thing? Sven's voice rose with frustration and desperate hope. Because 3 witnesses swear he never left the hall, their word against a piece of cloth. Freya leaned forward as far as her chains allowed. Unless we can prove he left, or find someone who saw him outside, it means nothing. Sven resumed his pacing, but differently now. Purposefully. Ingrid kept a journal. She wrote in it every night. Father does not know about it. She hid it under a loose board in her sleeping chamber. He met Freya's eyes. If she was involved with Leif, she might have written about it. You need to find it, read it. Bring me anything that, if I am caught reading my dead sister's private thoughts, my father will. Sven's jaw clenched. But I will do it. For her. For you. For the truth. He turned to leave, then stopped at the door. Freya, when Ingrid told you about the baby, how did she seem? Scared? Happy? Freya closed her eyes, pulling up that fragmented memory. Terrified. She said she did not know what to do. That telling the father would ruin everything. She opened her eyes. What does that mean, Sven? Why would telling the father ruin everything, unless... They both understood at the same moment. The horror of it settled over them like a shroud. Unless the father was already married, Sven whispered. Unless revealing the truth would destroy his family, his reputation, his standing. Is Leif married? Yes. His wife is the daughter of a powerful jarl from the Eastern Territories. Their marriage? Alliance is the only thing keeping peace between our settlements and theirs. Sven's face had gone gray. If it came out that he fathered a bastard on my sister, It could start a blood feud. His wife's family would demand compensation. My father would have to choose between family honor and political alliance. So Leif had every reason to keep Ingrid silent, and if she refused to end the pregnancy, Freya did not need to finish the thought. Sven nodded slowly. I will find the journal. If there is proof in there, I will bring it to the thing myself, no matter what my father says. After he left, Freya sat in the silence and thought about the pieces that still did not fit. If Leif had killed Ingrid to protect his marriage and political position, why frame Freya so elaborately? Why not just make it look like Ingrid fell or took sick? Or any of a dozen other explanations that would not have required stealing Freya's cloak, staging scratches on her arms, drugging her into unconsciousness? Unless there was something else, something she was still missing. Her father came at midday with bread and water, his face tight with frustration. I spoke to everyone who was at the feast. Half of them remember Leif being in the hall all night. The other half cannot say for certain either way. He sat heavily. Runa is still willing to testify that she saw him heading toward the stables, but her word alone will not be enough. Not against 3 witnesses who will swear he stayed. Inside. What if those 3 witnesses are lying? What if Leif paid them, or threatened them, or they are respected members of the community? Bjorn the blacksmith, Eric the boat builder, and Thora the Jarl's own housekeeper. Her father shook his head. No one will believe they are all lying. Not without proof. The day dragged on with agonizing slowness. Freya's mind kept circling back to the same questions. Why frame her? Why go to such elaborate lengths? And how had someone managed to drug her, drag her back to her bed, and create the perfect crime scene without anyone noticing? As evening fell and shadows lengthened across the storage house floor, Olaf appeared again like a ghost. He moved to her side and spoke in a voice barely above a breath. I asked around, quietly, about Leif. His weathered face was grim. 20 years ago, before he married, there was another girl, a farmer's daughter from his settlement. She got with child, his child. Freya's heart began to pound. What happened to her? Fell from a cliff while gathering bird eggs, broke her neck. Olaf's eyes were hard. Everyone said it was an accident, but the girl's mother swore until her dying day that Leif pushed her. No one believed a grieving mother over a Jarl's cousin. So he has done this before. Freya's voice shook with rage and terror. He has killed before to hide his bastards, and gotten away with it. Olaf glanced toward the door, which means he knows how to do it without getting caught. How to make sure no one questions the convenient story. The 3 witnesses who gave him an alibi. What if he did not pay them? What if they genuinely remember seeing him because someone else was wearing his clothes? Freya's mind raced. What if he has an accomplice? Someone who wore his tunic and stayed visible in the hall while Leif himself went outside. Olaf's eyes widened. Who would help him commit murder? Someone who had as much to lose as he did if the truth came out. Someone who... Freya stopped, a horrible realization crystallizing. Sven said Leif's marriage keeps peace between the settlements, that his wife's family would demand blood compensation if they knew about the bastard. So what if his wife already knows? What if she found out somehow and she helped him? She would have every reason to want Ingrid dead, every reason to protect her husband's reputation and her own. Freya's words came faster now. A woman could have stolen my cloak more easily than a man. Could have drugged my drink without suspicion. Could have waited until I passed out, then scratched my arms while I was unconscious. Leif's wife was not at the feast, Olaf said slowly. She is back in the eastern settlement, several days' journey from here. Are you certain? Did anyone actually see her there? Or did they just assume she was home because that is where she should be? The old thrall's face showed that he understood. If Leif's wife had traveled here in secret, if she had helped him murder Ingrid and frame Freya, and then disappeared back to the east before anyone realized she had been here at all. The door burst open. Sven stood there, his face wild, clutching a small leather-bound book. I found it. I found her journal. And Freya. His voice cracked. You were right about everything. But it is so much worse than we thought. He opened the journal with shaking hands and read aloud in the dying light. Leif says he will leave his wife for me and the baby. He says we will run away together, start fresh where no one knows us. He says he loves me. But I saw her today. I saw Yrsa. She was here, hiding in the woods near the longhouse, watching. She knows. God's help me, she knows. And the look on her face was murder. The entry was dated 2 days before Ingrid died. The final night before the thing, Freya lay on the cold dirt floor and felt the weight of impossible knowledge pressing down on her chest until she could barely breathe. She knew who killed Ingrid. She knew why. She even knew how it had been done with such meticulous care that an entire village believed her guilty. But she could not prove any of it. Sven had searched everywhere for evidence that Yrsa had been in the village that night. He questioned travelers, checked the stables for unfamiliar horses, spoke to every person who might have seen a strange woman. Nothing. Yrsa had been a ghost, invisible and deadly, and then gone like smoke. The journal entries helped, but Jarl Magnar refused to read them. My daughter's private thoughts died with her, he said, his voice hollow with grief that had hardened into something inflexible. I will not dishonor her memory by parading her secrets before the thing. Even Dag, who had started to doubt Freya's guilt, could not sway him. The Jarl wanted justice, yes, but the kind of justice that was simple and clean. A murderer punished. A father's rage satisfied. He did not want the messy truth about his daughter's affair with a married man, about a bastard grandchild that would never be born, about political alliances crumbling and blood feuds igniting. Freya understood with bitter clarity that sometimes people chose the comfortable lie over the devastating truth. Even good people. Even people who loved justice. The door opened, and she expected her father, or perhaps Olaf, with some final piece of useless information. Instead, Völva Astrid entered, and behind her, a figure wrapped in a dark cloak. Freya's heart stopped. She recognized that cloak, had seen it in the fragmented memories that still haunted her dreams. Easy, Astrid said quickly, holding up a wrinkled hand. She is not here to hurt you. She is here because I summoned her. Because the gods demand truth, even when men refuse it. The figure pushed back her hood. Yrsa was beautiful in a cold, sharp way, like a blade that had been polished until it gleamed. Her face was pale, her eyes dark and calculating. She looked at Freya with neither hatred nor remorse, just a kind of clinical interest. The thing convenes tomorrow morning, Yrsa said, her voice surprisingly soft. By midday you will be declared outlaw. By evening someone will kill you for sport or glory or simply because they can. She tilted her head. Unless you run tonight. I could arrange that. I could ensure the guards fall asleep, that your chains are left unlocked, that a horse is waiting by the northern trail. Freya stared at her, unable to form words. This woman, this murderer who had destroyed everything, was offering her escape. Why? Freya finally managed. Because I am not a monster, Yrsa said simply. I did what I had to do to protect my marriage, my family's alliance, my children's future. But I took no pleasure in it. She glanced at Astrid. The Völva has convinced me that you do not deserve to die for Ingrid's mistakes. Ingrid's mistakes? Rage flooded through Freya, hot and fierce. She loved your husband. She carried his child. The only mistake she made was trusting him when he promised to leave you. Something flickered across Yrsa's face. Pain, perhaps. Or recognition. Leif promised her nothing. I read her journal after the Völva shared its contents with me. My husband is many things, but he never promised that foolish girl anything. She invented a fantasy in her own mind. Yrsa's voice hardened. He used her for pleasure, yes. He was careless and stupid. But when she told him about the child, he came to me. Immediately. We decided together what had to be done. The casual way she said it made Freya's stomach turn. You decided together to murder her. We decided to protect our family, our 5 children, who would have been destroyed if the truth came out. Our alliance with the Eastern Jarls, which keeps hundreds of people fed and safe. My father, who would have demanded Leif's blood for the dishonor. Yrsa's eyes were cold and clear. One girl's life against all of that. The choice was simple. And me? Freya's voice shook. Why frame me? Why not just make it look like an accident? Because Ingrid told you the truth. We could not risk you putting the pieces together later and bringing accusations. Yrsa moved closer, and Freya could smell lavender and something metallic. Blood, maybe, that never quite washed away. It had to be someone the village would believe capable of killing her. Someone who had been seen arguing with her. Someone whose devotion to Ingrid was so intense it could be twisted into jealousy and rage. You drugged my drink. I slipped herbs into your cup when you were not looking. The same herbs Vulvas used to send people into deep healing sleep. Yrsa glanced at Astrid. Herbs I learned about from a vulva in my own settlement. You passed out within minutes of going outside with Ingrid. You never even saw me approach. The memory was there now, fully formed at last. Ingrid turning, her face changing from fear to recognition to absolute terror. Yrsa, please, I will leave. I will never tell anyone, please. And Yrsa, moving fast, a rock in her hand, bringing it down on Ingrid's skull with brutal efficiency. Ingrid crumpling, the sound of her skull cracking. Then Yrsa, methodical and calm, tearing Freya's cloak and placing it in Ingrid's hand, dragging nails across Freya's unconscious arms to create perfect scratches, putting bits of skin and blood under Ingrid's fingernails. You planned everything, Freya whispered. Every detail. I had to. Yrsa's expression did not change. Leif wanted to just push her off a cliff like... She stopped, realizing she had said too much. Like the other girl, 20 years ago. Freya felt cold understanding settle in her bones. He did push her, and you knew. You have always known what kind of man you married. I know he is weak and foolish when it comes to young women who look at him with worship in their eyes. Yrsa's voice carried a lifetime of bitterness. But he is also the father of my children and my partner in maintaining power and security. I will not let his weaknesses destroy what we have built. So you kill for him. You clean up his mistakes. I protect my family. That is what women do. Yrsa pulled her cloak tighter. Which is why I am offering you this chance. Run tonight. Disappear. Start a new life somewhere far from here where no one knows your name. I will ensure you make it out safely. Freya looked at this woman who had murdered her best friend, who had orchestrated the destruction of her life with chilling precision, who now offered mercy like it was a gift instead of an admission of guilt. And if I refuse? If I stand before the thing tomorrow and tell them everything, then you will be declared outlaw without proof, because Leif and I will both swear we were nowhere near the stables that night. Our witnesses will confirm it. The physical evidence all points to you. Yrsa's voice was matter-of-fact. You will die, probably within days, and Ingrid will still be dead, and the truth will die with you, and my family will continue on. The journal, Freya said desperately. It proves Ingrid was afraid of you. It proves she knew you were here. Words written by a foolish girl who confused fantasy with reality. Words that her own father refuses to share publicly because they shame his daughter's memory. Yrsa smiled, and it was the saddest smile Freya had ever seen. The Jarl wants simple justice. The village wants a murderer punished. No one wants the complicated truth that would unravel alliances and start blood feuds. They want you to be guilty, so you will be guilty. Evidence be damned. Velva Astrid, who had been silent until now, finally spoke. She is right, child. I have seen this pattern before. Truth matters less than convenience when powerful people want something buried. If you stay, you die. If you run, you live. But they win, Freya said, hearing the break in her own voice. Ingrid gets no justice. They get away with murder. And I lose everything. My family, my home, my name. You lose those things either way, Astrid said gently. At least running means you keep your life. Yrsa moved to the door. The choice is yours, but decide quickly. The guards will fall asleep in 1 hour. If you are still here when they wake, your chance is gone. She left, and the darkness seemed to deepen in her absence. Freya sat there, chains heavy on her wrists, and understood finally why Ingrid had looked so terrified in those last moments. Not just because she was about to die, but because she realized that sometimes the guilty do not face justice. Sometimes they walk free while the innocent suffer. Sometimes the truth is not enough. "What do I do?" Freya asked Astrid, her voice small and lost. The old Volva's eyes were ancient and sad. "I cannot tell you that, child, but I can tell you this. Running is not cowardice. Sometimes survival is the only victory available to us. Sometimes living to fight. Another day is all we can do. And if I stay, if I tell the thing everything, even knowing they will not believe me, then you will die with the truth on your lips. Some might say that is its own kind of victory." Astrid touched Freya's shoulder gently. "But dead martyrs do not change the world, child. Only the living can do that." The Volva left her alone with the most impossible choice of all. Run and live, letting Ingrid's murder go unavenged, or stay and die, accomplishing nothing except adding her own name to the list of Yrsa's victims. Outside, she could hear the village settling into sleep. 1 hour. In 1 hour, she could be free. In 1 hour, she could be running toward a new life, carrying the truth like a stone in her chest that she would bear alone forever. Or in 1 hour, she could still be here, chains on her wrists, waiting for dawn and a thing that would seal her fate. Freya closed her eyes and thought about Ingrid laughing. Ingrid alive. Ingrid whispering secrets in the dark. What would her friend want her to do? But she already knew the answer. Ingrid would want her to live. The question was whether Freya could live with herself if she ran. Freya was still sitting in the storage house when the guards fell asleep outside, their snores drifting through the cracks in the walls. Her chains hung loose on her wrists, unlocked as promised. A dark cloak lay folded by the door, and through the small window she could see a horse tethered in the shadows beyond the village edge, waiting. All she had to do was stand up and walk away, but her legs would not move. Her body felt rooted to the dirt floor like an ancient tree. And every time she tried to force herself to rise, Ingrid's face swam before her eyes. Not the dead face she had seen in the dirt, but the living one. Ingrid at 12, braiding Freya's hair and promising they would be sisters forever. Ingrid at 16, teaching her to read runes by firelight. Ingrid just weeks ago laughing until she cried over something so stupid neither of them could remember what it was. If she ran, Ingrid would become nothing more than a cautionary tale. A foolish girl who got herself killed over a married man. The truth would die, and in a generation, no one would even remember her name correctly. Freya stood, but not to run. She moved to the door and looked out at the sleeping guards, at the freedom waiting in the darkness beyond. Then she turned back and sat down again, this time with purpose instead of paralysis. When dawn broke pale and cold over the fjord, she was still there. The guards woke with startled confusion, checking her chains, finding them locked again because Freya had secured them herself. They never knew how close she had come to vanishing into the night. Her father arrived with the first light, his face drawn. "It is time." They walked through the village together, her chains replaced with rope binding her wrists. People lined the path to the thing ground, their faces showing everything from grief to satisfaction to uncertainty. Freya kept her head up, her back straight. If she was going to die, she would die with dignity. The thing ground was a circular clearing where the community had gathered for justice and decision-making since before anyone's grandfather could remember. Stones marked the boundary. In the center, Jarl Magnar sat in his carved chair, looking like he had aged 20 winters in 5 days. Sven stood behind him, his young face set hard. Dagi was there too, and Volva Astrid, and what seemed like every person from the village and surrounding farms. And there, standing calm and composed near the edge of the circle, were Leif and Yrsa. They had returned together that morning, Yrsa claiming she had come to support her husband through the grief of losing his cousin's daughter. No one questioned it, no one suspected. Yrsa's eyes found Freya's across the distance, and in them was a question. Why did you stay? Freya had asked herself that. Same question through the long night. She still was not certain of the answer. Stubbornness, maybe, or the bone-deep certainty that running would have killed something essential in her soul, or perhaps simply the knowledge that Ingrid deserved better than to be forgotten. Jarl Magnar stood and the crowd fell silent. His voice when he spoke was rough, scraped raw by grief and rage. "We gather for justice. 5 days ago my daughter Ingrid was murdered. The evidence against Freya, daughter of Eirik, is clear. Her cloak was found in Ingrid's hand. Scratches from Ingrid's struggle mark her arms. She was seen arguing with my daughter. She has no memory of the night, no alibi, no explanation that makes sense." He paused, and the silence was so complete that Freya could hear the distant cry of gulls over the fjord. "Does anyone speak for the accused before I pronounce judgment?" Her father stepped forward, his voice shaking. "I speak for my daughter. She is innocent. The evidence was placed by the real killer, too. Where is your proof?" The Jarl's voice cracked like a whip. "Where is anything beyond a father's desperate hope?" "The journal," Sven said suddenly, moving to stand beside Freya's father. His voice was stronger than Freya expected. "My sister's journal proves that she feared someone, that she knew she was in danger. I have forbidden those private writings to be shared," Magnar said, his face darkening. "My daughter's shame will not be—" "My sister is dead!" Sven's shout echoed across the Thing ground. Her shame matters less than the truth. She was carrying a child that was not Dag's, and the father wanted her silenced. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Dag's face went white, then red. Leif remained perfectly still, but Yrsa's hand moved almost imperceptibly to rest on his arm, a gesture that looked like comfort, but might have been warning. Jarl Magnar looked like his son had struck him. "What are you saying?" "I am saying that Freya did." "Not kill Ingrid, someone else did. Someone who had everything to lose if the truth came out." Sven's voice wavered but held. "And I think we should ask Leif why he left the village so quickly after Ingrid died. Why he ran before anyone could question him." All eyes turned to Leif. He stepped forward calmly, his handsome face arranged in an expression of confused hurt. "I left because I could not bear to stay for the funeral. Ingrid was like a daughter to me. The grief was too much." His voice was perfect, just the right amount of pain and dignity. "As for these wild accusations about a child, I know nothing of it, and I was in the mead hall all night during the feast. I never went near the stables. 3 witnesses can confirm it," Yrsa added, her voice clear and steady. "Bjorn, Eirik, and Thora all saw him. He never left the hall." Freya watched this performance and understood the true genius of it. They were not just lying. They were presenting a story so reasonable, so well supported, that it was easier to believe than the complicated truth. "I have proof," Freya said quietly. Every head swiveled toward her. Jarl Magnar's eyes narrowed. "What proof?" This was the moment, the choice she had been preparing for through the long night. She could reveal what she knew about Yrsa being in the village, about the pattern of Leif's past crime, about the meticulous planning that had gone into framing her. But without physical evidence, without witnesses who would dare contradict powerful people, her words would mean nothing. Or she could do something else, something desperate and dangerous and possibly brilliant. "I remember everything now," Freya said, her voice growing stronger. "The herbs Vulva Astrid gave me unlocked my memory fully. I remember Ingrid and I going outside. I remember her telling me about the baby. And I remember who came toward us in the darkness." Yrsa's face remained perfectly composed, but something flickered in her eyes. Fear, maybe, or calculation. "I remember," Freya continued, looking directly at Leif now, "that Ingrid called out a name. She said it clearly. She said, 'Please no, I will not tell anyone about what happened to Dala.'" The effect was instantaneous. Leif's face went rigid. Several older members of the community gasped. Yrsa's composure cracked, just for a moment, before she schooled her features back into neutrality. "Who is Dala?" Jarl Magnar demanded. An old woman near the edge of the circle spoke up, her voice reedy with age. "Dala was a girl from Leif's settlement, 20 years ago. She died falling from a cliff. She was carrying his child too." The crowd erupted in whispers. Leif's face had gone the color of ash. "That was an accident," he said, but his voice lacked conviction now. "Everyone knows it was an accident." "Then why would Ingrid mention her name?" Freya pressed, feeling the momentum shifting, feeling the crowd's doubt spreading like cracks in ice. Why would she bring up a girl who died 20 years ago, unless she knew it was not an accident? Unless you had confessed it to her in a moment of weakness? She was inventing now, building on a foundation of truth and hoping the structure would hold. "You told Ingrid about Dala, did you not? You told her how you got away with it once before. Maybe you meant it as a warning. Maybe you thought it would scare her into silence." Leif opened his mouth, closed it. His eyes darted to Yrsa, seeking guidance. And in that moment of hesitation, of looking to his wife for rescue, he confirmed everything. "She did not see who killed Ingrid," Yrsa said sharply, trying to regain control. "She was unconscious, drugged. She woke up in her bed with no memory. She is making up stories to save herself." "Am I?" Freya met Yrsa's eyes directly. "Then explain why you are here. You said you came to support your husband through grief. But you hate travel. Sven told me once that you never leave your settlement unless absolutely necessary. Yet you made a journey of several days just to stand beside Leif at a thing." The silence that followed Freya's words was so profound, she could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. Yrsa stood frozen, her mask of composure finally cracking at the edges. Around the thing circle, people were looking at each other with dawning realization, pieces clicking together in their minds. "You came because you had to," Freya continued, her voice steady now despite the terror coursing through her veins. "You had to make sure your plan held. You had to be here to control the narrative, to support the alibi, to ensure that no one looked too closely at what really happened that night." "This is absurd," Yrsa said, but her voice had lost its certainty. "I came because Leif needed me, because we heard the accusations and knew we had to defend ourselves against the truth." Völva Astrid stepped forward, her ancient eyes sharp. She reached into her cloak and pulled out the piece of torn fabric with silver thread. "I found this in Ingrid's left hand, the hand that no one examined because they were so focused on the green cloak in her right hand. It matches the tunic Leif was wearing at the feast." Leif's face had gone from ash to a sickly green. "That proves nothing. She could have grabbed my tunic earlier in the day during any normal interaction." "Show them your arms, Freya," Astrid commanded. Freya held out her bound wrists, turning them so everyone could see. "The scratches. Look at them closely. See how uniform they are? How perfectly parallel? Völva Astrid, you have treated many injuries. Would scratches made during a real fight look like this?" The old woman moved closer, examining the marks with professional precision. "No. These were made deliberately. Someone dragged fingernails across her skin while she was unconscious. Real defensive wounds would be chaotic, uneven, desperate." She looked up at the crowd. "These are staged, and I have never staged anything," Freya said, her voice ringing clear. "I did not scratch myself. I did not tear my own cloak and place it in Ingrid's hand. I did not drug myself unconscious and carry myself back to my bed. Someone did all of that to me. Someone who knew exactly how to create a perfect crime scene." She turned to face Yrsa fully now, and something in her expression must have shown absolute certainty, because Yrsa took an involuntary step backward. "You learned about herbs from a vulva in your settlement. Herbs that cause deep sleep. You slipped them into my drink when I was not looking. You waited for Ingrid and me to go outside, knowing we would because the hall was hot and crowded. You followed us." Freya's voice was quiet, but everyone heard every word. "You killed her with a rock to the head, quick, efficient. Then you spent careful minutes creating evidence against me, scratching my arms, tearing my cloak, putting bits of my skin under Ingrid's fingernails. You have no proof," Yrsa whispered, but there was defeat in her voice now. "I have the truth," Freya said, "and I have this." She nodded to Sven, who pulled out his sister's journal and opened to a marked page. "Ingrid wrote about seeing you. She wrote about how terrified she was because she knew what you were capable of. She wrote it all down, 2 days before she died. Sven's voice shook as he read aloud. Yrsa was here today, hiding in the woods. She knows about the baby. She knows everything. I saw the look on her face, and I am more afraid than I have ever been in my life. If something happens to me, if I die suddenly, it will not be an accident. She is going to kill me, and no one will believe it because they are too powerful, because alliances matter more than truth. I am writing this so someone will know, so Freya will know. The last words hit like stones dropped into still water. Ripples of shock moved through the crowd. Jarl Magnar's face had crumpled, the anger draining out of him, leaving only devastation. He reached for the journal with trembling hands, reading his daughter's words himself, and the sound he made was not quite human. "My girl," he whispered. "My girl knew. She knew, and I did not protect her." Dag was weeping openly now, his face buried in his hands. Around the circle, people were looking at Leif and Yrsa with expressions ranging from horror to fury to betrayal. "I want to hear it from them," Jarl Magnar said, his voice terrible in its quietness. He looked at Yrsa with eyes that held nothing but empty grief. "Did you kill my daughter?" Yrsa stood there, and Freya watched the calculation happen behind her eyes. She could deny it still, could claim the journal was fantasy, that Ingrid had been hysterical and paranoid, could insist on the alibi, on the witnesses, on reasonable doubt. But something in the Jarl's face must have told her that denial would no longer work, that the truth, once spoken, had weight that lies could not overcome. Yes, the word fell, like an axe. Yrsa's face was marble, hard and cold and beautiful. "I killed her. For my children. For my marriage. For the alliance that keeps hundreds of people safe and fed. She was one foolish girl who threatened everything I have spent 20 years building." The confession hung in the air, stunning in its casualness. Leif made a choking sound, reaching for his wife's arm, but she shook him off. "You are weak," she said to him, her voice full of contempt. "You could not do what needed to be." "Done. Just like with Dalla. I had to push that girl off the cliff myself while you stood there wringing your hands. And I had to clean up your mess this time too." The crowd erupted, people shouting, crying, demanding justice. But Freya barely heard it. She was watching Jarl Magnar, watching the moment when a father's need for revenge met the political reality of what punishing Yrsa would mean. War with the eastern settlements, blood feuds, alliances shattered. "Father, no." Sven grabbed his father's arm, reading the same calculation in his face that Freya saw. "You cannot let them go, not after what they did." But Magnar's face showed the terrible arithmetic of power. "If I execute them, Yrsa's father will come with 300 warriors. We have perhaps 80 men who can fight. The village would burn. More children would die. So they win." Freya's voice cut through the chaos. "Ingrid gets no justice? They confess to murder and walk away?" "No." Magnar's voice was iron. "They do not walk away." He stood and the crowd quieted. "Leif and Yrsa, you are exiled. Outlaws. You have until sunset to leave these lands. After that, any person may kill you without consequence. You will take nothing with you except the clothes you wear. Your properties revert to your families. Your names will be struck from all records. You will be as if you never existed. And our children?" Yrsa's voice finally showed emotion. "Fear. They stay with your families. They will never know what their parents did." Magnar's eyes were merciless. "You wanted to protect them? Then you will protect them by disappearing forever. If you ever return, if you ever try to contact them, I will tell them exactly what kind of monsters birthed them, and I will start the war you fear. Do you understand?" Yrsa's face showed that she understood perfectly. She had killed to protect her children, and now her punishment was to never see them again. To become nothing more than a shameful story they would be, told when they were old enough to understand. Leif had collapsed to his knees, sobbing, but Yrsa stood tall, accepting her sentence with the same cold efficiency she had used to plan a murder. We understand. As guards led them away to gather their things before exile, Freya felt her father's arms around her, felt the ropes being cut from her wrists, felt the weight of chains that had pressed on her soul for 5 days finally lifting. But there was no triumph, only exhaustion and grief. Jarl. Magnar approached her, and his face was so broken that Freya almost could not look at him. I owe you my daughter's justice. I owe you an apology that can never be enough. I owe you. You owe me nothing, Freya said quietly. I did not do this for you. I did it for Ingrid. He nodded, understanding. Then he did something unexpected. He removed the silver arm ring he wore, the symbol of his position, and held it out to her. This belonged to my daughter. She wanted you to have it. I found it in her chamber with a note. She wrote that if anything happened to her, her most precious possession should go to her truest sister. Freya took the ring with shaking hands. It was warm from Magnar's arm, heavy with meaning. She slipped it onto her own arm and felt Ingrid's presence like a ghost beside her. The thing dispersed slowly. People came to Freya, apologizing, weeping, trying to explain why they had been so quick to believe her guilty. She accepted their words with exhaustion, too tired to feel anger. Sven found her as the sun began to set. I read the rest of her journal. There were other entries, memories, stories about you. His voice was thick. She loved you more than anyone. She wrote that you were the only person who ever saw her as just Ingrid, not the Jarl's daughter or the future wife or the perfect girl everyone expected her to be. Just herself. Freya's eyes burned with tears she had been holding back for days. I loved her too. I know. Sven squeezed her shoulder. And because of that love, you did not run. You stayed and fought for her truth even when it would have been easier to disappear. That is what real courage looks like. As night fell over the fjord, Freya stood at the water's edge and thought about justice and truth and the price of both. Yrsa and Leif were gone, exiled into the wilderness with nothing but their guilt and each other. Their children would grow up without parents, carrying a shame they did not earn. The alliance with the eastern settlements was strained, but not broken, maintained only by silence and careful political maneuvering. It was not perfect justice. It was not clean or simple, but it was what they had. 20 years later, a young woman would come to Freya seeking advice. She would be Ingrid's daughter in all but blood, because Freya had raised her after Jarl Magnar died, had taught her to read and fight and think and question, had taught her that truth mattered even when it was hard, even when it cost everything. And when that young woman asked about the silver arm ring Freya always wore, Freya would tell her the whole story, about a girl named Ingrid who was too trusting, about a murder that almost went perfect, about choosing to stay when running would have been easier, about how sometimes justice takes generations to unfold completely, but it does unfold if someone is brave enough to plant the first seed of truth and tend it carefully until it grows into something that cannot be ignored, or forgotten or buried beneath convenient lies. The story would be passed down, generation after generation, changing slightly with each telling but keeping its essential truth, that the powerful do not always win, that the innocent should not always run, and that love sometimes requires standing in place and refusing to let darkness claim the light. Ingrid's name lived on, not as a cautionary tale or a shameful secret, but as a reminder that truth matters, that justice matters, and that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is refuse to let the people you love be forgotten. Freya had a choice that most of us pray we never have to face. She could run into the darkness and save herself, letting her best friend's murder fade into a convenient lie that protected the powerful and buried the truth forever. Or she could stay, knowing she would likely die, but refusing to let the person she loved become nothing more than a shameful footnote in someone else's story. What would you have done in that storage house, with freedom waiting just beyond the door and certain death waiting at dawn? Would you have chosen survival or truth? Because that is the question that haunts us long after the story ends. When the cost of justice is everything you have, is it still worth paying? The real tragedy is not that evil people exist. It is that good people so often choose comfort over truth, convenient lies over complicated justice, silence over the messy work of standing up for what is right. Freya could have disappeared and no one would have blamed her. She had every reason to run and almost no reason to stay. But she understood something that most of us forget. Some things matter more than our own survival. Some truths are worth dying for. Some loves demand that we plant ourselves like trees and refuse to be moved, even when the storm comes to tear us apart. This story stays with us because it forces us to examine what we would sacrifice for the people we love and the truth we claim to value. It reminds us that courage is not the absence of fear, but the choice to do what is right even when we are terrified. If this story moved you, if it made you think about justice and love and the price of both, take a moment to like this video and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to this channel for more stories that challenge us to be better, braver, and more honest with ourselves. Because these are not just stories. They are mirrors showing us who we are and who we could choose to become.